The Confederate States of America, commonly referred to as the Confederacy, was a confederation of secessionist American states existing from 1861 to 1865. It was originally formed by 7 slave states in the Lower South region of the United States whose regional economy was mostly dependent upon agriculture, particularly cotton, and a plantation system that relied upon the chattel enslavement of African Americans. Each state declared its secession from the United States following the November 1860 election of Republican candidate Abraham Lincoln to the U.S. presidency on a platform which opposed the expansion of slavery. A new Confederate government was proclaimed in February 1861 before Lincoln took office in March, but was considered illegal by the government of the United States. After civil war began in April, 4 slave states of the Upper South also declared their secession and joined the Confederacy. The Confederacy later accepted Missouri and Kentucky as members. Although neither officially declared secession nor were they ever largely controlled by Confederate forces, Confederate shadow governments attempted to control the 2 states but were later exiled from them. The government of the United States rejected the claims of secession and considered the Confederacy illegitimate. The American Civil War began with the April 12, 1861 Confederate attack upon Fort Sumter, a Union fort in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. In spring 1865, after very heavy fighting, largely on Confederate territory, all the Confederate forces surrendered and the Confederacy dissolved. No foreign government officially recognized the Confederacy as an independent country, although Great Britain and France granted it belligerent status. While the war lacked a formal end, essentially all Confederate forces had surrendered or disbanded by the end of 1865. Jefferson Davis later lamented that the Confederacy had disappeared in 1865 span of control. On March 11, 1861, the Confederate Constitution of 7 state signatories, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, replaced the February 7 Provisional Confederated States Constitution with one stating in its preamble a desire for a permanent federal government. 4 additional slaveholding states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, declared their secession and joined the Confederacy following a call by U.S. President Abraham Lincoln for troops from each state to recapture Sumter and other lost federal properties in the South. Missouri and Kentucky were represented by partisan factions from those states, while the legitimate governments of those 2 states retained formal adherence to the Union. Also aligned with the Confederacy were 2 of the 5 civilized tribes, and a new, but uncontrolled, Confederate territory of Arizona. Efforts to secede in Maryland were halted by federal imposition of martial law, while Delaware, though of divided loyalty, did not attempt it. A Unionist government in western parts of Virginia organized the new state of West Virginia, which was admitted to the Union on June 20, 1863. Confederate control over its claimed territory and population in congressional districts steadily shrank from 73% to 34% during the course of the Civil War due to the Union's successful overland campaigns, its control of the inland waterways into the South, and its blockade of the southern seacoast. With the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863, the Union made abolition of slavery a war goal. As Union forces moved southward, large numbers of plantation slaves were freed, and many were enrolled in Union service as soldiers, teamsters and laborers. The most notable advance was Sherman's March to the Sea, in late 1864. Much of the CSA's infrastructure was destroyed, including telegraph, railroads and bridges. Plantations in their path were severely damaged. Internal movement became increasingly difficult for Southerners, weakening the economy and limiting army mobility. These losses created an insurmountable disadvantage in men, materiel, and finance. Public support for Confederate President Jefferson Davis's administration eroded over time due to repeated military reverses, economic hardships, and allegations of autocratic government. After 4 years of campaigning, Richmond was captured by Union forces in April 1865, and shortly afterward, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant, effectively signaling the collapse of the Confederacy. President Davis was captured on May 10, 1865, and jailed in preparation for a treason trial that was ultimately never held. The U.S. government began a decade-long process known as Reconstruction, which attempted to resolve the political and constitutional issues of the Civil War. The priorities were to guarantee that Confederate nationalism and slavery were indeed dead, to enforce the 13th Amendment, which outlawed slavery, the 14th, which guaranteed dual U.S. and state citizenship to all, and the 15th, which guaranteed the right of freedmen to vote. By 1877, Reconstruction ended in the former Confederate states, and political control in each of them had been gradually re-established by white Southern Democrats, many of whom had formerly been disenfranchised by Reconstruction policy. The pre-war South had many rich areas. The war left the entire region economically devastated by military action, ruined infrastructure, and exhausted resources. The region remained well below national levels of prosperity until long after World War II.